too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. Sometimes, late at night, when the world finally quiets down, I catch myself thinking about the parts of me I've tried to forget. The small, quiet parts that used to feel everything so deeply. I don't mean anything dramatic. It's more like a faint echo, a whisper of a younger version of me who still lives somewhere inside, hoping I'll stop long enough to notice. I used to think growing up meant leaving all of that behind. The tears, the confusion, the wide-eyed wonder, the open-hearted trust. Becoming stronger, wiser, more capable. But lately, I've been realizing that I didn't actually grow past those feelings. I just buried them, hid them behind sarcasm, achievements, responsibilities, all those things that adults are supposed to do. But the truth is, there's a part of me that still aches for something I can't always name. A part that still flinches when I feel rejected, that freezes up when I think someone might leave, or questions my worth when I make the smallest mistake. I used to shame myself for being too sensitive, but now I see that maybe that sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was a voice trying to get my attention. I remember reading something by Carl Jung that stuck with me, that inside every adult is a child that was never fully seen, never fully loved for who they truly were. That idea hit me like a wave, not because it was new, but because it felt so personal, like someone had finally named what I had always felt but never understood. That hidden child, that's the part of us that never got closure. The part that learned early on that it was safer to adapt than to be real. And so we built these masks. We smiled when we were hurting. We performed instead of expressing. And after a while, we lost track of who we really were underneath it all. I think about how many of us walk through life chasing things, approval, status, love, thinking that if we just try hard enough, we'll finally feel whole. But it never quite works, does it? Because we're not actually chasing success or affection. We're chasing a feeling we used to have before the world told us we had to be someone else to be accepted. That's what I mean by the forgotten voice within. It's not gone. It's just been quiet for so long. And the more we ignore it, the louder our lives become in other ways. With anxiety, burnout, emptiness. We distract ourselves with busy schedules, toxic relationships, or even noble goals. Anything but stillness. Anything but listening. But when we finally slow down, when we dare to sit with our own discomfort, something shifts. That forgotten part of us starts to stir. It's like remembering a dream you thought was lost, but it comes back in fragments. A memory, a feeling, a question you've been avoiding. For me, that moment came in the middle of what looked like success. I had all the things I thought would make me feel secure, but I still felt hollow. I couldn't understand why I was so sensitive to criticism, why I kept sabotaging relationships, why I was constantly second-guessing myself. And then it hit me. I wasn't broken, I was still wounded. And I had been trying to fix the symptoms without ever tending to the source. That realization was painful. It meant I had to admit that parts of me weren't okay. It meant revisiting memories I didn't want to touch. It meant slowing down when everything in me wanted to keep running. But I also started to feel something else, a kind of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. Not the naive kind, but a deep, grounded sense that maybe healing was possible, if I was willing to be honest with myself. So I started listening, not to the voice that said I wasn't enough or that I needed to do more, but to the small, trembling voice underneath it all, the one that said, "Please see me. Please don't leave me behind." And honestly, that's when things began to change. Not all at once, but gently, like light returning to a room I hadn't stepped into in years. If you've ever felt like you were too much or not enough at the same time, if you've ever looked around at your life and thought, why does this still hurt? You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just carrying someone who's been waiting for you to come back. Let's go find them together. There's this question I keep coming back to. When did I stop being me? Not the me that knows how to navigate life and keep things together, but the version of me that used to laugh without hesitation, cry without shame, and trust without armor. The me that didn't yet know the rules of approval and rejection. The one who just was, without needing to prove anything. I think we all have a moment like that. A before and after. Before we learned to hide. Before we decided it was safer not to feel too much, not to speak too loudly, not to want too deeply. And then something happens. Maybe someone laughed at us, ignored us, punished us, or simply failed to notice us when we needed them most. It doesn't always take a catastrophe to break something. Sometimes it's the quiet, repeated absence of warmth that does it. For me, it wasn't one big traumatic moment. It was small things that added up. Times when I was told to toughen up, when my feelings were brushed aside, when I got praise for being good, but not for being real. Little by little, I got the message. You're more lovable when you're less yourself. So I adapted. I became who I thought people needed me to be. I made myself smaller, more agreeable, more together. But with each mask I put on, I lost a little piece of something sacred. And the thing is, it worked for a while. I got by. I fit in. I learned how to be liked, how to perform. But I also became disconnected, not just from others, but from myself. That pure, honest version of me went underground, replaced by someone always watching, always calculating. What do they want from me? How do I make sure I'm accepted? Carl Jung talked about the persona, the mask we wear to meet the demands of the world. It's not evil or fake. In many ways, it's necessary. But when we mistake the mask for the self, we get lost. We forget how to feel without filtering, how to speak without editing, how to live without constantly asking, am I doing it right? I started asking myself, when did I first feel like I had to earn love instead of just receiving it? When did I learn that being vulnerable was risky, that being honest might cost me connection? And when I sat with those questions, old memories floated up. Not all of them painful. Some were just sad. Like watching a child slowly give up on being fully seen. Like watching someone dim their own light because it drew too much attention. That's the moment we begin to disappear. And yet, that child never truly vanishes. She lingers, waiting, hoping. And here's the hard truth. She doesn't just wait in silence. She acts out, not in tantrums or drama, but in patterns. In the way we pick partners who don't value us. In the way we sabotage good things. In the way we get defensive when someone touches an old wound we haven't admitted is still bleeding. I've lived that. I've seen it in others too. Beautiful, capable, kind people who can't quite explain why they feel so insecure, so anxious, so ashamed. And often, the answer isn't in the present. It's in the past. In a moment that taught us it was dangerous to be fully ourselves. But you know what else I've realized? That child, the one we silenced, still holds the most precious parts of us. Our sensitivity, our creativity, our playfulness, our capacity for love and wonder and connection. She isn't a burden. She's the doorway back to everything we thought we had to give up. So when we stop running, when we pause long enough to ask, what did I lose myself? We're not reopening old wounds just to feel pain. We're making space to reclaim the parts of us we never should have had to hide. It's not about blaming our parents or the culture or life. It's about grieving what was lost and choosing, maybe for the first time, to be radically honest with ourselves. To say, yes, that moment hurt me. Yes, I shut down. Yes, I've been protecting myself for so long that I forgot what it means to feel safe without a shield. And maybe it's time to take that shield off, just for a moment, because behind all our defenses is the original self, still alive, still waiting. And the moment we decide to listen, really listen, something sacred begins to stir. I don't know the exact moment I stopped being me, but I do know this. I've started to find my way back. And you can too. It's strange how the past can echo in the present. How something we barely remember can shape how we react, how we love, how we see ourselves. I used to think I was just too sensitive or overreacting when certain things hit me harder than they should have. A partner's silence, a friend's distant tone, even mild criticism. I'd feel this rush of emotion, like something inside me had just cracked open. At first, I'd beat myself up for it, tell myself to grow up, to toughen up, to stop being so dramatic. But eventually, I got curious instead of judgmental. And what I discovered changed everything. Those intense reactions weren't coming from the adult me, the one who knows how to handle life and think things through. They were coming from the child inside, the one who never felt fully seen, the one who learned, somewhere along the way, that love could be withdrawn at any moment, that safety was conditional, that worth had to be earned. That child still lives in me, and I've started to see how she shows up in the smallest moments, not with words, but with feelings. Panic, insecurity, that urge to withdraw or people please. It's not random. It's patterned, repeated, familiar. Carl Jung talked about how the unconscious, when not brought to awareness, controls our lives, and we call it fate. And honestly, I see that in myself and in so many people I love. We keep attracting situations that replay old wounds, not because we're cursed, but because the psyche is trying to resolve something, trying to complete a story that was never given a proper ending. I used to think I just had bad luck in relationships, but now I see that I was drawn, unconsciously, to people who echoed the dynamics of my early life. Not because I enjoyed the pain, but because my inner child was trying to rewrite the ending, trying to finally be chosen, heard, loved by someone who couldn't offer those things the first time around. The same goes for my work. I push myself hard, needing to be exceptional, constantly afraid of being found out as not enough. Every compliment felt like a temporary reprieve. Every critique, even the smallest, felt like collapse. I didn't know how to feel secure without external validation. I didn't know how to rest unless I had proven my worth. But all of that, all of it, was the echo of a child who learned early on that love was conditional. That being good, being helpful, being quiet or impressive or self-sufficient, that was the way to be safe, to be accepted. So, when I started noticing these patterns, not just seeing them, but feeling where they were rooted, it opened a door. A hard one, yes, but a necessary one. I began asking myself in those moments of overwhelm, whose voice is this really? Who inside me is feeling this way? Sometimes the answer was a 6-year-old who felt invisible. Sometimes it was a teenager who had to pretend everything was fine just to avoid being a burden. And every time I met that voice with compassion instead of shame, something inside began to soften. It wasn't about blaming anyone. It was about naming the truth. And from that place, something powerful began to happen. I stopped reacting and started relating to myself, to others, to life. It's not easy. These patterns are sticky. They've been there a long time. But they're not who we are. They're who we became in order to survive. And now, as adults, we have the choice to listen differently, to respond differently. When I feel the urge to overachieve, I ask myself, what am I trying to prove and to whom? When I feel triggered in a relationship, I pause and ask, what part of me feels unsafe right now? And what does she need? It's not always graceful. Sometimes I get it wrong. But every time I choose awareness over autopilot, I reclaim a little more of my power, a little more of my freedom. And the beautiful, humbling thing is this: the more I listen to that child inside, really listen, the less she needs to scream. The patterns begin to shift. The emotional storms begin to calm. Not because life becomes easier, but because I'm no longer abandoning myself in the middle of it. That, to me, is healing. Not perfection. Not becoming some untouchable version of whole. Just this quiet, daily practice of turning inward with love and saying, I see you. I hear you. I'm not leaving you behind anymore. That's when everything starts to change. There's something incredibly tender and terrifying about turning toward that forgotten part of yourself and simply saying, I'm here now. The first time I really did that, it was awkward. I didn't know what to say or how to begin. I just sat in silence with a lump in my throat, trying to feel something that had been buried for years. I wanted to connect with my inner child, this concept I'd heard about, read about, even nodded along too, but when it came down to it, it felt strange. Like I was reaching out to a ghost of myself I wasn't sure would answer. But I stayed with it, and eventually, she showed up. Not with words, with a feeling, a flood of old memories, a sense of deep sadness mixed with longing, like someone who had been waiting at the edge of a forest for years, hoping I'd come back. That moment broke me open, because I realized I'd spent most of my life waiting for someone else to love that part of me, someone else to make her feel safe, worthy, whole. But it was always supposed to be me. Carl Jung said healing begins when we dare to face ourselves, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. When we stop trying to fix our pain like a problem and instead hold space for it like we would a crying child. That's what this part of the journey became for me. Not a mission to change who I was, but to meet who I had abandoned. So I began creating that space. Some days it looked like writing letters to my younger self, telling her the things she never got to hear. You were never too much. You didn't deserve to be ignored. Your feelings made sense. Sometimes it was as simple as sitting in a quiet room with my hand on my heart and whispering, "I'm listening." And other days it was messy, old pains surfacing, guilt, resistance, that voice that said, "This is pointless," or "You should be over this by now." But I knew better by then. That voice was the ego, trying to protect me from discomfort. The inner child doesn't shame you. She just wants to be seen. There's a moment in every healing journey when you realize the thing you've been running from is not nearly as dangerous as the running itself. Avoidance keeps the wound infected. But attention? Attention is medicine. It's slow medicine, though. You don't take it once and feel better. It's a daily return, a soft commitment, a kind of emotional reparenting where you become the person you needed when you were small. What surprised me most was how this inner work started affecting my outer life. I thought I was doing something private, internal, almost invisible, but soon I noticed that my relationships felt different. I wasn't as easily triggered. I didn't shrink as much around criticism. I stopped chasing people who didn't have space for me. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Because when you start giving yourself the love you were starved of, you stop begging for crumbs from people who can't feed you. And it's not about being independent or never needing anyone. It's about having a secure base inside, a sense of home in your own being. So when the world feels harsh, you have somewhere to return to that isn't another person's approval. One of the biggest lessons I've learned in this process is that healing doesn't mean erasing pain. It means building the capacity to hold it with gentleness, to hold yourself with gentleness. We don't become invulnerable. We become more honest. And with that honesty comes a different kind of strength, a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to shout or prove itself. It just is. The moment I stopped trying to silence that inner voice and started welcoming it, my life began to make more sense. Patterns that confused me started to feel explainable. Emotional waves that used to knock me over now feel navigable. I can see the tide coming, feel it rise, and stay rooted. That's not something anyone else can do for you. That's the power of returning to yourself. And if no one's ever told you this, let me say it now. You are allowed to feel it all. The grief, the rage, the sorrow, the hope. You are allowed to speak to your younger self with kindness. You are allowed to go back and pick up the pieces, not because you're broken, but because you deserve to be whole. And maybe, just maybe, when you sit quietly enough, you'll hear that small voice inside whisper back, "I've been waiting for you." There's something magical that happens when you start showing up for your inner child. Not once, not as a performance, but again and again, like a ritual. It's like the walls you didn't even realize you'd built start to soften. You feel safer in your own skin. And with that safety, something unexpected begins to awaken. Something wild, intuitive, and deeply creative. For me, it felt like a return to a part of myself I didn't know I was missing. This soft, quiet power started bubbling up. Not the kind of power that comes from control or achievement, but the kind that comes from connection, from wholeness, from knowing who you are beneath all the masks. And it's in that space, the space where the inner child begins to trust you again, that your feminine energy, your intuitive self, your creative essence begins to breathe again. For so long, I had misunderstood what feminine energy really meant. I thought it was softness in the traditional sense, being gentle, accommodating, nurturing to others. But I've come to learn that the feminine is receptivity, not submission. It's not about being small or pleasing. It's about being open, deeply connected to your body, your instincts, your knowing. When we're disconnected from our inner child, we're disconnected from that energy. Because the inner child is our creative life force. She's the source of our spontaneous joy, our emotional honesty, our capacity to play, to feel deeply, to love fully. And when she's wounded, when she's silenced, that current of energy gets blocked. I saw in myself. I became sharp when I wanted to be soft. I hardened out of self-protection. I overthought instead of feeling. I distrusted my own intuition. And I looked for someone else, a partner, a mentor, a system, to give me the answers I was carrying all along. It's not that I didn't want to trust myself. I just forgot how. And the more I reclaimed my inner child, the more that trust returned. I began to hear the whisper of my own inner voice again. I began to feel what was right for me, not because someone told me, but because my body told me. My heart told me. That's the beginning of feminine power, learning to hear yourself again. And it's messy. It doesn't follow linear rules or fit into neat boxes. It's cyclical, emotional, intuitive. It rises and falls like waves. And the more I embraced that, the more alive I felt. It was in the small things, the way I danced around my apartment just because a song moved me, the way I paused in the middle of a busy day to feel the sun on my skin, the way I started saying no without apologizing, the way I stopped waiting for permission to feel beautiful, worthy, or whole. That shift changed everything. I stopped chasing emotionally unavailable people. I stopped tolerating situations that drained me. Not because I suddenly became cold or closed off, but because I finally recognized what it felt like to be full. And when you're full, you stop accepting half-hearted love. You stop shrinking. You stop performing. You start choosing differently from alignment, not fear. It's funny how many of us think healing means becoming someone better. But real healing, especially feminine healing, is about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And it's powerful. God, it's powerful. When a woman reclaims her inner child and begins to trust her feminine energy, she becomes radiant in a way that has nothing to do with looks or charm. It's the kind of radiance that comes from self-intimacy, from the knowing that you belong to yourself first. That's not selfish. That's sacred. And from that sacred place, love flows differently. Boundaries feel clearer. Creativity comes easier. You stop trying to fix yourself and start nurturing yourself. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing with clarity, with softness, with strength. This isn't about becoming invincible. It's about becoming authentic, about stepping back into the rhythm of your own soul, letting yourself feel again, trust again, create again. And that only happens when we stop silencing the child inside, the one who once believed in magic, who cried freely, who trusted her own heartbeat. She was never the problem. She is the portal. There's a quiet shift that happens when you begin to live from presence instead of pain. It's subtle at first, like realizing you no longer flinch at the things that used to hurt. Like noticing your breath is deeper, your reaction slower, your words kinder. And it's not because the world suddenly became softer. It's because you did. Not weaker, just more honest, more anchored, more awake. Before I started healing, I lived mostly in reaction. I didn't even know it. It felt normal. Someone would say something, and I'd shrink, or flare up, or fall into self-doubt. I thought I was just being sensitive. But looking back, I can see it clearly. I wasn't responding from the present moment. I was reacting from a wound, a memory, a part of me that still believed she had to defend her worth at all costs. Carl Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. And I think most of us don't realize how much of our life is being lived on autopilot, driven not by choice, but by unhealed emotion, by that inner child who's still afraid of not being enough, still waiting for someone to tell her she's safe. But healing changes that. It doesn't erase the pain. It gives it context. It gives you the power to decide what happens next. I remember the first time I recognized I was about to react, but didn't. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest, that urge to lash out or run away. But instead of following the script, I paused. I breathed. I asked myself, what's really happening here? And in that space, I realized I wasn't in danger. I was just scared. I didn't need to defend myself. I needed to soothe myself. That's what presence feels like. It's not about control. It's about relationship with your own nervous system, your own thoughts, your own history. It's about moving from survival mode into connection, not just with others, but with yourself. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes your default. Not because you never get triggered, but because you learn to recognize the voice behind the reaction. And you meet it with compassion instead of judgment. That's the difference between being run by pain and being in relationship with it. We all carry stories that shaped us, but we don't have to live inside them forever. We can start asking new questions. We can stop assuming every raised eyebrow means rejection. We can stop believing that love must be earned or proven or chased. Instead, we can say, I see you. I know where you come from, but I choose something different now. And that choice, over and over again, is what rewires your life. It rewires your emotions, your relationships, your sense of self. It doesn't mean you never cry or doubt or feel lost. It means when those feelings come, you no longer collapse into them. You hold them. You stay present. You stay with yourself. And that changes everything. Because what most of us really long for isn't perfection. It's inner safety. A felt sense of home. Not just in a place or a person, but in ourselves. That's the gift of healing. The return to presence. The ability to walk through hard things without abandoning who you are. The ability to say no without guilt. To say yes with your whole heart. To know when to speak, when to listen, and when to let go. You stop needing to be right, or liked, or impressive. You start needing to be real. And being real becomes enough. I won't pretend this path is easy. It asks a lot. It asks for honesty, for courage, for slowness in a world that rewards speed. It asks you to feel what you once avoided, to grieve what you never got, to forgive parts of yourself you were taught to hate. But it gives you something even greater, peace. Not the kind that comes from everything going well, but the kind that stays even when things fall apart. That's the kind of peace I wish for you. Because once you taste it, once you know what it feels like to stay with yourself instead of escaping, you'll never want to go back. You'll see how much energy you've spent protecting yourself from pain. And you'll start using that energy to live, to love, to be. And that is freedom. The most surprising part of this journey, the one I never expected, is how quiet it feels at the end. Not dull, not empty, but quiet, steady, like finally finding your footing after years of stumbling in the dark. It's not a finish line or some final victory. It's more like a homecoming, not to a place, but to yourself. For most of my life, I chased things I thought would fill the void. Love, success, approval, validation. I wasn't greedy, I was hungry, desperate, even, for something I couldn't name. I thought if I achieved enough, gave enough, became enough, that hunger would disappear. But it never did. And now I understand why. That emptiness wasn't a flaw in me. It was a signal, a message from the forgotten parts of my soul, telling me that something sacred had been left behind, that no amount of doing would ever make up for the not being. I didn't need to fix myself. I needed to find myself. The self I left behind when I believed I had to be someone else to be loved. And that journey of going back and picking up those pieces, of listening to the child who was once silenced, of learning to stay present through fear instead of running, has led me here, to a place I never thought I could reach. Wholeness, not perfection, not constant joy or unshakable confidence, just wholeness. The kind that comes from accepting all your parts, the messy, the scared, the joyful, the angry, the soft. The kind that allows you to walk into any room without needing to prove or hide anything. The kind that whispers, you're safe now. You belong. Carl Jung called it individuation, the integration of all aspects of the self. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming who you've always been, underneath the fear, the conditioning, the shame. And once you reach that place, everything changes. You stop accepting crumbs because you know you deserve more than survival. You stop fearing solitude because you've finally become your own companion. You stop chasing love that hurts because you've learned how to give it to yourself. And people notice, not because you become louder or flashier, but because your energy shifts. You carry a different frequency, one that says, I know who I am. I don't need to convince you. That energy is magnetic, not because it pulls people in, but because it repels anything misaligned. And with it, you begin to build a life that reflects your truth, not your trauma. Your relationships deepen. Your creativity expands. You start saying no with ease and yes with joy. Not because you read it in a book or followed a checklist, but because you feel it in your bones. I matter. I am enough. I am whole. It's not the kind of transformation that screams. It hums. It grounds. It holds. And yes, it continues. There's still hard days. Still moments of doubt. But now, they don't unravel you. They don't make you question your worth. They're just weather. And you become the sky. You are no longer at the mercy of your wounds. You are in conversation with them. You are no longer waiting to be saved. You are your own sanctuary. And in that truth, there is peace. Deep, lasting, liberating. So if you're on this path, if you're somewhere in the middle, still aching, still wondering if it's worth it, let me tell you, it is. Because on the other side of that ache is not a perfect life. It's your life, and it is waiting for you to come home. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.